Welcome to week 3 of Writing in Science. This week our central question is what pre-writing activities set up our bilingual students for success in communicating their scientific thinking? Before we get to this question, let's take stock in what we've done so far. In week 1, you identified the most meaningful work that students are doing in the science class to set them up to write something meaningful. In week 2, we've talked about identifying an audience for the students' writing. So when we do some experiments or some meaningful work in science, some students are ready to go, ready to write conclusions and describe their results. Whereas other students might be sitting there with their pencils in their hands, really stuck in getting going. This week we're talking about the pre-writing activities we can do to really help those students get into the writing process. We're going to focus on 2 problems that might cause a hang-up for your students. The first is difficulty with the science concepts themselves. They bring to the lab or to the experience a partial understanding, and they might still be struggling with that partial understanding or the misconceptions they brought into the unit. The second possible problem that we'll also discuss this week is just difficulty taking their scientific thinking and turning into a coherent set of ideas and sentences and getting their writing going. Let's talk about these 2 problems that students might have in getting to writing conclusions in the context of a real lab. This lab happens to be one of my favorites. It's simple, the equipment isn't expensive, but we're going to measure whether the weight of an object has an effect on its acceleration due to gravity. You can do this by sticking a couple of pennies together, and student groups would work together to take a stopwatch and measure the amount of time it takes these pennies to roll down this simple yardstick ramp. So I can set my pennies on this ramp. It's a little difficult. You got to kind of play with this. And with a stopwatch on a student's phone, they can start and stop. A group of them can work. Now we can change the weight of the object or the mass by just simply adding another penny to it. So here I have 3 pennies. I'm going to roll it down. You can stick them together with a little piece of tacky or some tape. Stick my 2 to my 3. Students can collect a lot of data on this, so they'll have a lot of stuff to look at and analyze. And what's great is that the data on this lab shows that the weight of an object does not affect its acceleration due to gravity. Now this really works against students' misconceptions. Of course students see in their lives that a brick falls faster than a heavier. They know that a brick falls faster than a feather. They know that a truck rolls out of control down a hill if it's heavily loaded. They have a lot of experience to make them bring a misconception to this lab that the weight of an object affects its acceleration due to gravity, when really there are a number of factors, including air resistance and other forms of resistance, that cause that misconception to be a reality in their lived experience. But we want to try to teach them about Newton's laws. We have this great set of data here that shows that the heavier objects, like these 5s, the set of 5 pennies, rolls just as fast as the lighter objects down this ramp. So let's think about our 2 problems in the context of this lab. We have students that are going to continue to have their misconceptions dominate their conclusions when they begin to write this. This is the case for all human beings, right? We readily ignore the facts in favor of our preconceptions. And we'll have other students that have the ideas, they have the conceptions just right in their heads, but they're really struggling to turn them into ideas in writing form. So we need a single set of strategies that are going to address both of these problems when we sit down to write with our students. The 3 strategies that you'll have as options for exploring this week are using targeted small group instruction, using photo documentation, and finally using concept maps. In implementing any of these 3 strategies, all students are going to benefit. Students have support in organizing their ideas, and in doing so, misconceptions can be specifically addressed. So let's talk about these 3 options and what in particular they do for our bilingual students. Small group instructional conversation, where the teacher guides a conversation dominated by student talk, has been shown to be one of the most effective environments for language. During instructional conversation, students make sense of the content and use everyday language as a bridge to more academic ways of expressing ideas. With careful planning, some students might sit down to begin their writing while the teacher pulls a small, select group of students and targets just the right level of language for the different learners. If you explore the second option, photo documentation, you'll explore creating a set of pictures to represent the work students did. In doing so, you're creating what we call a non-linguistic representation of the content upon which students can build language. And this fits perfectly with the integration of WIDA language learning framework. Entering and emerging bilinguals can begin to label or construct simple sentences about the work they did. Developing and expanding level students begin to link sentences that integrate more technical language. If you explore the third option, concept maps, you can begin to look at tailoring the writing product you want students to develop and get a concept map that, again, fits as a perfect bridge to the writing process. You'd be giving bilingual students a map for the structure at a discourse level that we expect of scientific and technical writing. Bilingual students at the emerging and developing levels can put short sentences into the structure of the concept map, while students at higher proficiency levels use the map to organize their more sophisticated sentences into coherent arguments. We can continue to try to apply the learning from the past 2 weeks of this workshop. So when it comes to meaningful work, we try to take the data from this lab, and we try to have students relate the data to their lived experience. And in that case, we're going to have to use a really higher conceptual thinking to get to why a person riding down on a hill on a bike seems to be affected by the mass or the weight of the person, and why that data from this lab didn't fit with that. In coming back to week 2, when we identify the audience, we can give students opportunities. We can say the audience members for your writing, the readers for your writing, are going to have some misconceptions, and you need to make it clear in your writing what the misconceptions about acceleration due to gravity are, where they come from, and how the theoretical might differ from the real experience. Whatever you choose for this week, whether it's targeted small group experience, photo documentation, or concept maps, I hope you'll do your best to apply this in the classroom, and I hope you find it meaningful in making your classroom a place for bilingual excellence.